The heavy metal crate hit the floor with a loud crash. Zarathek winced at the sound. Her supervisor, a fat green alien named Bortok, glared at her with all four of his eyes. "Careful with that cargo, you big lizard," Bortok snapped. "Those medical supplies cost more than you make in a year." Zarathek said nothing. She simply picked up the crate and placed it gently on the correct shelf. Her massive hands, which could crush steel, handled the box like it was made of glass. She had learned to be gentle. She had to be gentle now. The cargo bay of Station 47 was always busy. Ships came and went every hour, bringing goods from across the galaxy. Zarathek had worked here for 3 years. 3 long, quiet years. She loaded boxes, moved supplies, and tried to forget who she used to be. But forgetting was hard when you were 8 feet tall with dark green scales and claws that could cut through armor. Other workers whispered about her when they thought she could not hear. They wondered what a Veltarian warrior was doing working such a simple job. Some guessed she was a criminal hiding from the law. Others thought she was sick or broken somehow. They were not completely wrong. Zarathek finished loading the ship and walked to the break room. She sat alone at a small table and ate her simple meal. Around her, other workers talked and laughed. She listened, but did not join in. She had learned it was better to stay quiet and alone. The wall screen was playing the afternoon news. Most of it was boring trade reports and weather updates from different planets. Zarathek was not really watching until she heard the announcer mention the Gladiator games. "The Crimson Arena continues to draw record crowds," the newsreader said. "Tonight's matches promise to be especially bloody with 3 death matches scheduled." Zarathek's hand tightened around her food container. The plastic began to crack under the pressure. She forced herself to relax and look away from the screen. But it was too late. The memories were already coming back. She remembered the roar of the crowd, the smell of blood and fear, the weight of weapons in her hands, the faces of those she had killed. All those faces burned into her memory forever. "The reigning champion, Krax the Destroyer, will face 2 opponents at once," the announcer continued. "Betting is heavy on this match as Krax has not lost a fight in over 2 years. 2 years. Zarathek had been undefeated for 5 years before she escaped. They used to call her the Crimson Reaper because her claws would drip red after every fight. The crowd would chant her name and demand more blood, more death. She pushed the memories away and stood up. Work was better than remembering. Work kept her hands busy and her mind quiet. She walked back to the cargo bay and started organizing supplies that did not need organizing. Hours passed. The day shift ended and the night shift began. Most workers went home to their families. Zarathek went to her small room on the lower levels of the station. It was barely big enough for her massive frame, but it was all she needed, all she wanted. She sat on her narrow bed and looked at the only decoration in the room. It was a small stone carving of a Veltarian peace symbol. Her mentor, old Kethvar, had given it to her just before he died. She remembered his final words clearly. "Promise me, young one," he had whispered, blood on his lips from his last fight. "Promise me you will find a way to live without killing. There is more to life than death and violence. Promise me." She had promised. That promise was the only thing that kept her sane during her last months in the arena. It gave her the strength to escape when the chance came. And it was the reason she lived this quiet, simple life now. Zarathek held the stone carving in her large hands. She had kept her promise for 3 years. She had not hurt anyone, not even when other workers were rude to her. She had not used her strength for violence. She had found peace just as Kethvar wanted. But peace was fragile, and sometimes the past came looking for you. The communication device on her small table began to beep. Zarathek stared at it in surprise. No one ever called her. She had no friends, no family, no connections to her old life. Who could be trying to reach her? She activated the device with one careful claw. The screen flickered to life, showing a masked figure in a dark room. "Greetings, Crimson Reaper," the figure said in a voice that was clearly disguised. "I know you think your fighting days are over. I know you believe you have escaped your past. but I have something that will change your mind. Zarathek's blood went cold. Someone had found her. Someone knew who she really was. She should shut off the device and run. She should disappear again, find another station, another identity. But she did not move. Something in the figure's voice kept her frozen in place. You once saved a human pilot named Jake Morrison, the figure continued. You helped him escape from the arena 5 years ago. Do you remember him? Jake. Of course she remembered Jake. He was the only good thing from her time in the arena. The only person who had seen her as more than just a killer. The only one who had looked at her with kindness instead of fear. The screen changed. Now it showed a live feed from a gladiator arena. Zarathek recognized it immediately. It was Arena, Complex 7, one of the deadliest fighting pits in Syndicate space. On the sand floor, surrounded by cheering aliens, a human figure fought desperately against a massive beast. The human had brown hair and wore torn combat gear. He moved with skill and determination, but he was clearly outmatched. As he turned to dodge the beast's attack, Zarathek saw his face clearly. It was Jake Morrison. Older now, with scars and lines that had not been there 5 years ago. But it was definitely him. The kind human who had changed everything for her. The man who had shown her that there was more to life than killing. And he was going to die in that arena. The human fights tomorrow night, the masked figure said. It will be his final match. Win or lose, he will not survive. Unless, of course, someone were to help him. Someone with the skills of a former champion. The transmission ended. The room fell silent except for the hum of the station's life support systems. Zarathek sat motionless, staring at the blank screen. Jake was alive. After all these years, he was alive. But not for long. She looked down at the peace symbol in her hands. She had made a promise to Kethvar. A sacred vow never to kill again. Never to return to the violence that had nearly destroyed her soul. But Jake was going to die, and she was the only one who could save him. 5 years earlier, Zarathek had been a different person. She was still the Crimson Reaper then, undefeated champion of the gladiator circuits. Her cell was bigger than her current room, decorated with weapons and trophies from her victories. But it was still a prison. She was cleaning her claws after another bloody victory when the guards brought in the new prisoner. Zarathek looked up and felt surprised. The prisoner was human, and humans were rare in the arena. Most died too quickly to provide good entertainment. This human was different, though. He was tall for his species, with brown hair and steady blue eyes. Most new prisoners were crying or begging when they arrived. This one stood straight and looked around calmly, taking in every detail of his surroundings. Fresh meat for the Reaper, Guard Captain Vexna laughed. She was a cruel creature who enjoyed watching others suffer. The arena masters want you to train this one. Make him last at least 3 fights before he dies. The human looked at Zarathek, without fear. Most beings trembled when they first saw her. She was huge even by Veltarian standards, with battle scars covering her dark scales. Her claws were stained red from her recent fight. She looked like exactly what she was, a killer. But the human just nodded politely and said, "Hello, I'm Jake Morrison." Zarathek stared at him. In 5 years of fighting, no new prisoner had ever introduced themselves to her. They usually cowered in the corner or tried to attack her in desperation. This Jake Morrison was clearly insane. "I don't talk to food," she growled in the common galactic language. Jake smiled. It was a strange expression for someone facing certain death. "Well, that's unfortunate. I was hoping we could be friends." Vexna laughed harder. "Friends? The human thinks the Reaper wants friends. How amusing." She left them alone, still chuckling at the human's stupidity. Jake looked around the cell with interest. He examined the weapons on the walls and studied the trophies from Zarathek's victories. She watched him carefully, waiting for him to try something stupid. But he just sat down on the floor and began doing strange exercises. "What are you doing?" Zarathek asked, despite herself. "Staying in shape," Jake replied, continuing his movements. "If I'm going to fight in the arena, I need to be ready. My ship was carrying medical supplies to a colony under attack. I can't let those people down by dying easily. Zarathek felt confused. The human was talking about other people he wanted to help. In the arena, everyone only thought about themselves. Survival was all that mattered. Yet here was this strange creature worrying about people he would never see again. You will die in your first fight, she told him bluntly. Humans are weak. You have no claws, no natural armor, no strength. The crowd will barely notice when you fall. Jake stopped exercising and looked at her seriously. Maybe. But I have to try. Those people need those medical supplies. Even if I die, maybe my sacrifice will mean something. For the first time in years, Zarathek felt something other than anger or emptiness. She could not understand this human. Why did he care about strangers? Why was he willing to die for people who would never know his name? Over the next few days, Jake continued his strange behavior. He shared his food with Zarathek even though she did not need it. He asked about her battles, but not for tips on how to kill. He wanted to know if she was hurt, if she needed anything, if she was lonely. Lonely. Zarathek had never thought about it before. She had been alone in the arena for so long that she had forgotten what it felt like to have someone care about her well-being. Jake told her stories about his homeworld, Earth. He described blue skies and green forests, places where people lived, in peace. He talked about his sister Lisa, who was a doctor helping sick children. He spoke of friends who shared meals and laughter without fear. It sounds impossible, Zarathek said one evening. A world without violence or fear. It's not perfect, Jake admitted. We have problems too. But most people try to help each other instead of hurting each other. We believe that everyone deserves a chance at happiness. Even killers like me? Jake was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, You're not a killer by choice, are you? You fight because they make you fight. That's different from choosing to hurt people. Zarathek had never thought about it that way. She had been captured as a child and raised in the arena. Fighting was all she knew. But Jake was right. She had never chosen this life. What would you do if you were free? Jake asked. The question surprised her. Freedom was not something arena fighters thought about. It was impossible, like Jake's peaceful homeworld. I don't know, she answered honestly. You could learn, Jake said gently. It's never too late to become someone different. On the day of Jake's first fight, Zarathek felt something she had never experienced before. She was worried about someone else. She watched from her cell window as Jake faced a massive insect-like creature in the arena below. Jake had no chance. The creature was 3 times his size with razor-sharp claws and natural armor. But he fought with courage and intelligence, using the arena environment to his advantage. He dodged and weaved, striking at weak points when he could. The crowd was impressed despite themselves. They had expected the human to die in seconds, but he lasted nearly 10 minutes. When he finally fell, bleeding but alive, they actually cheered for him. Jake survived 2 more fights over the next week. Each time, Zarathek found herself hoping he would live. Each evening, she looked forward to hearing his stories and his strange ideas about peace and kindness. Then came the night that changed everything. A riot broke out in the lower levels of the station. Someone had overloaded the power grid, and emergency systems were failing throughout the complex. In the chaos, several cell doors malfunctioned and opened. This is our chance, Jake said urgently. We can escape during the confusion. Zarathek stared at the open door. Freedom was right there. But she hesitated. I can't, she said. If they catch me trying to escape, they'll make my next fights even worse. And if I succeed, they'll punish other fighters to make an example. Jake grabbed her massive hand with his small human ones. You don't have to live like this forever. You deserve better than this place. I'm a monster, Zarathek said quietly. This is all I'm good for. You're not a monster, Jake said firmly. You're kind and intelligent and caring. I've seen it this past week. You just need a chance to be something other than a fighter. Through the corridors, they could hear guards shouting and alarms blaring. Soon the riot would be contained and their chance would be gone. "Come with me," Jake pleaded. "We can find a way off this station together." For a moment, Zarathek almost believed it was possible, almost believed she could have a different life. But then reality crashed down on her. "I can't," she whispered. "But you can. You have to go, Jake. Get back to your sister. Help those people who need medical supplies. Live the life you're supposed to live." Jake's eyes filled with pain. "I won't leave you here." "You have to," Zarathek said. She gently pushed him toward the door. "One of us should be free. One of us should get to choose their own path." Jake hesitated for one more second. Then he hugged her quickly, his small arms barely reaching around her massive frame. "I'll come back for you," he promised. "Somehow, someday, I'll find a way to get you out of here." "Don't," Zarathek said. "Forget about me. Live your life." But, as Jake disappeared into the chaotic corridors, she knew she would never forget him. He had shown her something she had never believed in before. Hope. Hope that there was more to existence than violence and death. Hope that even someone like her could change. Guards found her still standing in her cell when they restored order. They punished her severely for not escaping, suspecting she had helped other prisoners get away. But Zarathek endured the pain without complaint. She had something now that they could not take away. She had Jake's words about peace and kindness. She had his belief that everyone deserved a chance at happiness. And someday, somehow, she would find a way to honor that belief. She would find a way to become someone different. Zarathek stared at the blank communication screen for a long time. Her hands shook as she held Kethvar's peace symbol. Jake was alive, but he would not be for much longer. She had to make a choice that would change everything. She stood up and walked to the small storage unit in her room. Inside were the few possessions she had brought from her old life. Most were worthless now, but buried at the bottom was something she had hoped never to touch again. Her old Gladiator identification card. The holographic surface still showed her face from 5 years ago. She looked younger then, but her eyes were cold and empty. The card bore her arena name in glowing letters: Crimson Reaper, undefeated champion. Below that were her fight statistics: 47 matches, 47 victories, 63 kills. Looking at those numbers made her feel sick now. Each kill had been a living being with thoughts and feelings and dreams, but at the time they had just been obstacles to overcome. Zarathek packed her few belongings into a small bag. She left her work clothes behind and put on the only other outfit she owned, a simple black robe that covered most of her body. It would help hide her identity until she reached the Arena Complex. The journey to Arena Complex 7 took 2 days by commercial transport. Zarathek kept her hood up and stayed in her small cabin the entire time. Other passengers whispered about the tall, cloaked figure, but no one bothered her. She spent the time thinking about Jake and trying to plan what she would do. She could not simply storm into the arena and demand his release. The complex was heavily guarded and filled with dangerous criminals. She needed to be smart about this. When the transport reached Arena Complex 7, Zarathek felt her stomach twist with old memories. The station looked exactly the same as it had 5 years ago. Massive and dark, like a metal fortress floating in space. Thousands of ships surrounded it, bringing spectators from across the galaxy to watch beings kill each other for entertainment. The docking bay was crowded with aliens of every species, rich merchants, criminal bosses, and thrill-seekers all mixed, together in the busy area. The air smelled of exotic foods, expensive perfumes, and underlying fear. Zarathek followed the crowd toward the main entertainment levels. Everywhere she looked, screens showed highlights from recent matches. The sound of clashing weapons and dying screams filled the air. She had to force herself to keep walking. The registration area for new fighters was exactly where she remembered it. A bored-looking alien sat behind a desk processing paperwork for desperate beings who thought they could win their freedom in the arena. Next, the clerk called without looking up. Zarathek approached the desk and placed her old identification card down. The clerk glanced at it, then did a double-take when he saw the name. Crimson Reaper? He whispered, staring up at her with wide eyes. But you disappeared years ago. Everyone thought you were dead. I took a vacation, Zarathek said simply. Now I want to fight again. The clerk's hand shook as he activated his computer system. Within minutes, word was spreading throughout the complex that the legendary Crimson Reaper had returned. Security guards came to escort her to the fighter levels, and she could hear spectators in the halls talking excitedly about her comeback. Arena fighters were housed in better cells than regular prisoners, but they were still prisons. Zarathek's new cell was larger than her old one, with modern equipment and even a small entertainment system. The arena masters wanted their champions to be comfortable between fights. She ignored the luxury and immediately began gathering information about current fighters. The computer system gave her access to fighter records and upcoming match schedules. It did not take long to find what she was looking for. Jake Morrison was listed as Human Fighter 47. His record showed 12 matches over the past month. He had won 8 and lost 4, which was remarkable for someone of his species. Most humans died in their first or second fight, but his next match was scheduled for tomorrow night, and it was listed as an execution match. Zarathek read the details. With growing horror, Jake would face 3 opponents at once: a massive reptilian beast, a cybernetically enhanced warrior, and a pack of trained killer animals. The match was designed to be spectacular and completely one-sided. Jake was meant to die slowly and painfully for the crowd's entertainment. She looked up his current location and felt her heart sink. Jake was being held in the punishment levels, far below the normal fighter quarters. Those cells were reserved for prisoners who had caused trouble or who were scheduled to die soon. Getting to Jake would not be easy. The punishment levels were heavily guarded and access was restricted. But Zarathek had to try. She needed to see him, to let him know that someone was here to help. That evening, she made her way through the complex's corridors. Her return had caused quite a stir, and many beings stopped to stare at her as she passed. Some looked excited to see the famous Crimson Reaper again. Others looked nervous, remembering her reputation for brutal efficiency. The elevator to the punishment levels required special authorization. Zarathek approached the guard station and showed her fighter identification. "I want to see the human prisoner," she said. "Fighter 47. The guard, a scarred creature with too many teeth, looked suspicious. Why would a champion want to visit a dead man? "Professional curiosity," Zarathek replied. "I hear he's put up good fights. I want to see what makes him special before he dies." The guard laughed nastily. "Nothing special about him. Just another soft human who got lucky a few times. But if you want to waste your time, go ahead." The punishment level was cold and dark. The cells here were barely large enough for their occupants, with just a small slot for food delivery. Zarathek walked slowly down the corridor, reading the names on each door. She found Jake's cell at the end of the hall. Through the small window, she could see him sitting on the floor in meditation pose. He looked older and thinner than she remembered, with new scars on his face and arms. But his posture was still strong and determined. Zarathek tapped quietly on the door. Jake looked up and their eyes met through the small window. For a moment, he did not recognize her. Then understanding dawned on his face. "Zarathek?" he whispered. She nodded, unable to speak. Seeing him again brought back all the emotions she had buried over the past 5 years. Relief that he was alive, anger that he was here, and fear that she might be too late to save him. "How did you find me?" Jake asked softly. "Someone sent me a message. They showed me your fight on the arena feeds." Zarathek looked around to make sure no guards were watching. "Jake, your next match is an execution. They mean for you to die tomorrow night." Jake nodded calmly. "I know. They told me when they brought me here. 3 opponents, no weapons, no mercy." He smiled sadly. "I guess my luck finally ran out." "No," Zarathek said firmly. "I won't let that happen. I'm going to get you out of here." "How?" "This place is a fortress. And you swore never to fight again, remember? You told me about your vow to find peace." Zarathek touched the peace symbol hidden under her robe. Some things are more important than vows. Jake pressed his hand against the window from his side. Don't throw away everything you've worked for because of me. You found a way to live without violence. Don't go back to being the Crimson Reaper. Then what do you want me to do? Zarathek asked desperately. Just watch you die. Yes, if that's what it takes to keep you free, Jake said. I've had a good life since I escaped. I helped establish colonies, delivered medical supplies to places that needed them, made a difference. If it ends here, at least it meant something. Footsteps echoed down the corridor. A guard was making his rounds. Zarathek had to leave before she was caught. Visiting a condemned prisoner. I'll find another way, she whispered through the window. I won't let you die alone. As she walked back to her cell, Zarathek's mind raced with possibilities. She could not simply break Jake out. There were too many guards and too many security systems. But maybe she could find another way to save him. The arena masters would want to maximize the entertainment value of Jake's execution match. They would want the crowd excited and engaged. Perhaps she could use that to her advantage. Back in her cell, Zarathek activated the communication system and sent a message to the arena management. She requested a meeting with the head of operations. Within an hour, she received a reply. They would see her first thing in the morning. She spent the night planning what she would say. By dawn, she had decided on a course of action that might save Jake's life. It would require her to enter the arena again, to risk everything she had worked for over the past 3 years. But as she held Kethavar's peace symbol in her hands, she realized that some promises were worth breaking. Some people were worth fighting for, and some battles were worth the cost to your soul. Jake had saved her spirit 5 years ago when he showed her there was more to life than violence. Now it was her turn to save him, even if it meant becoming the Crimson Reaper one more time. The arena manager's office was exactly as Zarathek remembered it. Expensive decorations from a dozen worlds covered the walls, and the desk was made from rare crystal that cost more than most beings made in their entire lives. Behind the desk sat Grextor, a bloated creature whose species she could not identify. His forearms moved constantly as he typed on multiple keyboards at once. The famous Crimson Reaper, Grextor said without looking up. I thought you were dead. Disappearing like that cost us millions in lost revenue. I needed time to think, Zarathek replied. Now I'm ready to fight again. Excellent news, Grextor said, finally meeting her eyes. The crowd has been talking about nothing else since word spread that you're back. We've already sold out tonight's matches just on the rumor that you might appear. I want to make a deal, Zarathek said carefully. I'll fight in a special match tonight, but I have conditions. Grextor leaned back in his chair, all 4 arms, folding across his massive belly. You're hardly in a position to make demands. You've been away for 5 years. The crowd might have forgotten how good you really are. Then let me prove it, Zarathek said. Give me the human prisoner, Fighter 47. Let me fight alongside him in a team match instead of his execution. Impossible, Grextor laughed. That human is scheduled to die tonight. The crowd wants blood and his death will provide excellent entertainment. Why would I risk disappointing them? Zarathek had expected this response. She had prepared for it. Because a team match with the Crimson Reaper will make you more money than a simple execution, she said. Think about it. The legendary champion fighting alongside the surprisingly tough human, marketed as a test of whether human determination can match alien skill. The betting will be enormous. Grextor's eyes showed interest, but he tried to hide it. What kind of team match did you have in mind? Give us opponents that will challenge both of us. Make it a real fight, not an execution. If we win, the human gets moved back to regular fighter status. If we lose, you get the blood the crowd wants. And what do you get out of this arrangement? A chance to see if I still have what it takes to be a champion. Grextor was quiet for a long moment, calculating profits in his head. Finally, he nodded slowly. Very well. But I choose the opponents, and I choose the rules. If you're really as good as your reputation claims, it shouldn't matter. Agreed, Zarathek said. though she felt nervous about what kind of opponents Grextor might select. The match will be tonight, during prime viewing hours. You and the human against 3 opponents of my choosing. No weapons except what you can find in the arena. Victory condition is simple. Eliminate all opponents or be eliminated. Zarathek nodded and left the office. She had bought Jake a chance at survival, but now they both had to fight for their lives together. She spent the morning preparing. Arena servants brought her new fighting gear, lightweight armor that would protect her vital organs without restricting movement. The familiar weight of combat equipment felt strange after 3 years of peaceful living. In the early afternoon, guards brought Jake up from the punishment levels. He looked surprised when they put him in the cell next to Zarathek's instead of taking him to the execution chambers. "What's happening?" he asked through the bars between their cells. "I made a deal," Zarathek explained. "We fight together tonight as a team. If we win, you live. If we lose, we both die," Jake finished. "You shouldn't have done this. Now you're at risk too. I couldn't just watch you get murdered for entertainment." Jake was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Thank you. I know what this cost you." They spent the remaining hours before the match talking strategy. Jake described the opponents he had faced in previous fights, and Zarathek shared what she remembered about arena tactics. Despite the circumstances, she found herself enjoying their conversation. It felt good to have someone to plan with, someone who understood the situation they faced. As evening approached, arena servants came to prepare them for the fight. Jake received basic armor similar to what Zarathek wore. It would not stop a serious attack, but it might prevent minor injuries from deciding the match. The walk to the arena brought back powerful memories for Zarathek. The sound of the crowd growing louder with each step, the smell of blood and sand. The weight of expectations and the knowledge that death was only one mistake away, but this time was different. This time she was not fighting alone. They emerged from the tunnel into the bright lights of the arena floor. The crowd's roar was deafening. Tens of thousands of beings from across the galaxy screamed and cheered as they saw the famous Crimson Reaper return to combat. "Ladies, gentlemen, and beings of all species," the announcer's voice boomed across the arena. "Tonight we present a special exhibition match. The legendary Crimson Reaper has returned, and she brings with her the surprisingly resilient human known as Fighter 47. Jake looked around at the massive crowd with wide eyes. "I've never fought in front of this many people before," he said. "Don't look at them," Zarathek advised. "Focus on our opponents and the environment. Everything else is just noise." The arena floor was standard design, a large circular space, covered in sand, with various obstacles and barriers scattered around. Some could be used for cover, others might hide weapons or traps. The walls were too high and smooth to climb, ensuring that fighters could not escape. "Their opponents tonight," the announcer continued, "are 3 of our most dangerous fighters. First, the cybernetic warrior known as Steel Fang, enhanced with military-grade implants and armed with energy weapons. A door opened on the far side of the arena, and a humanoid figure emerged. Half of its body had been replaced with mechanical parts that gleamed under the lights. Energy weapons were built into its arms, and its movement was unnaturally precise. Second, the Beastmaster Kuskta, accompanied by her trained pack of razor wolves. Another door opened, revealing a tall, thin alien covered in spines. Around her prowled 6 wolf-like creatures with metallic claws and teeth. They moved with pack intelligence already spreading out to surround their prey. And finally, the berserker known as Bone Crusher, whose strength and fury are matched only by his love of violence. The third opponent was a massive creature that looked like a cross between a bear and a gorilla. It stood nearly as tall as Zarathek but was twice as wide, with muscle-bound arms that could probably tear a person in half. Jake swallowed hard. "Well, this should be interesting. Stay close to me," Zarathek said. "We need to work together if we're going to survive this." The arena horn sounded, signaling the start of the match. Immediately, the 3 opponents began moving toward them, with deadly purpose. Steel Fang raised its energy weapons and began firing bright bolts of plasma. Zarathek grabbed Jake and dove behind a barrier just as the shots seared the air where they had been standing. The razor wolves spread out in hunting formation, trying to flank them while Kazkata directed their movements with sharp whistles. Bone Crusher charged straight forward, roaring with rage and swinging massive fists. "We can't stay defensive," Jake said, ducking as another plasma bolt hit the barrier above their heads. "They'll wear us down eventually." Zarathek nodded. She had been thinking the same thing. In team matches, the key was to eliminate opponents quickly before they could coordinate their attacks effectively. "Can you handle the wolves?" she asked. "Probably," Jake replied. "What about you?" "I'll deal with the others." For the first time in 3 years, Zarathek felt her old fighting instincts awakening. The familiar calm that came before violence settled over her mind. Her muscles tensed, ready for action. But as she prepared to move, she thought about her vow to Kethvar. She thought about the 3 peaceful years she had spent learning to live without killing. Was she about to throw all of that away? Then she looked at Jake, brave and determined despite facing impossible odds. He was here because he had tried to help others. He was going to die because he had chosen to be good in a universe that often punished goodness. Some things were worth fighting for. Some people were worth the cost to your soul. "Ready?" she asked. Jake nodded. "Let's do this." Together they burst from behind the barrier and charged into battle. Zarathek moved like water flowing around stone. 3 years of peace had not dulled her fighting skills. They had simply been sleeping, waiting for the moment when they would be needed again. She rolled to the left as Bone Crusher's massive fist smashed into the ground where she had been standing. The impact left a crater in the arena floor. While the berserker was off balance, she struck at the nerve cluster behind his knee. He roared in pain and stumbled forward. Behind her, Jake was dealing with the razor wolves. He had found a broken spear shaft and was using it to keep the pack at bay. The wolves were smart and patient, looking for an opening to tear him apart. Steel, Fang's energy weapons continued to fire plasma bolts across the arena. Zarathek used the barriers and obstacles for cover, getting closer with each movement. The cyborg was powerful, but it fought like a machine, predictable and without creativity. When she got close enough, Zarathek grabbed a handful of sand and threw it at Steel Fang's optical sensors. The cyborg's targeting system was confused for just a moment, but that was long enough. She ducked under its arm and drove her claws into the power coupling at its shoulder. Sparks flew as the energy weapon shut down. Steel Fang tried to grab her with its other arm, but Zarathek was already moving. She had learned long ago that speed and intelligence could defeat raw power. A scream from behind made her spin around. One of the razor wolves had gotten past Jake's guard and slashed his leg. Blood was flowing freely and he was having trouble staying upright. Bone Crusher had recovered from her nerve strike and was charging again. Steel Fang was working to repair its damaged weapon. The wolf pack was closing in on Jake. They were losing the fight. Zarathek felt the familiar coldness settling over her mind, the same emptiness that had carried her through 47 arena victories. Her vision narrowed to focus only on threats and targets. Her emotions shut down, leaving only the need to kill. She was becoming the Crimson Reaper again. "No," she whispered to herself. "I won't go back to that." But Jake stumbled and fell, the wounded leg unable to support his weight. The wolves sensed weakness and moved in for the kill. In seconds, they would tear him apart. Zarathek had a choice. She could try to fight while holding back, maintaining her vow of pacifism and watch Jake die, or she could become the monster she used to be and save the man who had shown her what it meant to be human. She made her choice. The transformation was instant and terrifying. 3 years of peace fell away like a discarded costume. Zarathek's muscles swelled with adrenaline, and her claws extended to their full length. Her eyes turned from gentle brown to the cold yellow of a predator. The Crimson Reaper had returned. She moved faster than the crowd could follow. One moment, she was across the arena, the next she was among the wolf pack. Her claws cut through the first wolf before it knew she was there. The second tried to turn and face her, but she was already past it, leaving it bleeding in the sand. The remaining wolves scattered, their pack hunting instinct telling them they were now the prey. But there was nowhere to run in the arena. Zarathek hunted them down one by one with ruthless efficiency. Eskata screamed in rage as her trained killers died around her. She pulled out an energy whip and lashed at Zarathek, but the Reaper caught the weapon in her hand and yanked the Beastmaster forward. One quick strike to the throat, and Kazkata collapsed. Steel Fang had repaired its weapon and was firing again. Plasma bolts seared the air around Zarathek, but she moved like a ghost between the shots. When she reached the cyborg, she did not try to disable it gently. Her claws punched through its chest armor and ripped out the power core. The cyborg fell backward, sparks flying from its ruined systems. That left only Bone Crusher. The massive berserker had been watching the destruction of his teammates with growing fear. He had heard stories about the Crimson Reaper, but seeing her in action was different from listening to legends. "I surrender," he said, backing away from her. But the Reaper was beyond hearing. She stalked toward him with murder in her eyes. Bone Crusher tried to run, but there was nowhere to go. She caught him at the arena wall and drove her claws deep into his chest. The crowd went silent. They had gotten the blood they wanted, but something felt wrong. The Crimson Reaper was supposed to be controlled, disciplined. This creature before them was pure violence without restraint. Zarathek stood over Bone Crusher's body, breathing hard. Blood dripped from her claws onto the sand. Around her lay the bodies of all their opponents. The match was over. They had won, but she did not feel victorious. She felt empty and cold, the way she used to feel after every fight in the old days. She had kept her promise to save Jake, but she had broken her vow to Kethavar. She was a killer again. Zarathek. Jake's voice cut through the roar of the crowd. She turned to see him struggling to stand, using the broken spear as a crutch. His leg was still bleeding, but his eyes were concerned and gentle. "It's over," he said softly. "We won. You can stop now." She looked down at her blood-covered claws. "I promised him I would never kill again. I gave him my word." "And you kept it for 3 years," Jake said, limping closer despite his injury. "You found peace and learned to live without violence. That matters even if you had to break your vow to save me." "I'm a monster again," Zarathek whispered. "No," Jake said firmly. "A monster kills for pleasure or profit. You killed to protect someone you care about. That's different." The arena management was already moving to capitalize on their victory. Guards surrounded them not as prisoners but as valuable assets. Grextor himself came down to the arena floor, his forearms spread wide in celebration. "Magnificent," he declared. The crowd loved it. "We'll schedule your next match for tomorrow night." "No," Zarathek said quietly. "Excuse me? No more matches. Our deal was for one fight. We won. The human returns to regular fighter status." Grextor's expression darkened. "You think you can just waltz back in here, put on one show, and then dictate terms to me? You're fighters. You belong to the arena now." Jake stepped forward despite his wounded leg. "Actually, we don't." He reached into his armor and pulled out a small device. With a quick movement, he activated it and threw it against the arena wall. Immediately, alarms began blaring throughout the complex. "Security breach in Sector 7, voices announced over the communication system. "All guards report to emergency stations." In the confusion that followed, Jake grabbed Zarathek's arm. "My sister Lisa isn't just a doctor," he said with a grin. "She's also a commander in the Colonial Defense Force. That was a tracking beacon. Her rescue team should be breaking through the outer hull right about now." Explosions echoed through the station as heavily armed soldiers fought their way through the complex's defenses. The crowd panicked and began rushing for the exits. Guards abandoned their posts to deal with the invasion. "You planned this," Zarathek said in amazement. "I've been sending coded messages to my contacts whenever I could," Jake replied. "I knew someone would eventually mount a rescue operation. I just had to stay alive long enough for them to find me." They made their way through the chaos toward the emergency exits. Jake's leg was slowing them down, but Zarathek helped support his weight. Behind them, the arena complex burned as the rescue team fought to reach them. "Why didn't you tell me?" About the rescue plan? Zarathek asked as they climbed through damaged corridors. Because I didn't know if it would work, Jake said. And because I needed you to fight with everything you had. If you thought rescue was coming, you might have held back and gotten us both killed. They reached an outer airlock, just as colonial soldiers broke through from the other side. The lead soldier, a woman with Jake's brown hair and determined expression, pulled off her helmet and rushed to embrace her brother. Lisa, Jake said with relief, I knew you'd come for me. You always were too stubborn to die easily, Lisa replied. Then she looked at Zarathek with curiosity. And who is this? The friend I told you about, Jake said. The one who saved my life 5 years ago. And again tonight. Lisa studied Zarathek carefully. The big alien was covered in blood and looked like she had just fought her way through hell. But her eyes were gentle, and she was clearly protecting Jake despite her own injuries. Any friend of Jake's is welcome aboard our ship, Lisa said. But we need to leave now. This place will be crawling with syndicate reinforcements soon. As they made their way to the rescue ship, Zarathek felt confused about what came next. She had saved Jake, but in doing so she had become a killer again. Where could someone like her go? What kind of life could she have now? Jake seemed to sense her thoughts. You could come with us, he said, as they boarded the ship. The Colonial, Defense Forces always looking for experienced fighters. People who know how to protect others instead of just hurting them. I don't know if I can be trusted with that kind of responsibility, Zarathek said. You can, Jake said with certainty. You proved that tonight. You could have killed me 5 years ago when we first met, but you chose to help me instead. You could have left me to die in that arena, but you chose to save me. You're not defined by the violence you've done. You're defined by the choices you make. Zarathek looked out the ship's window as they flew away from the arena complex. Behind them, the station was burning and broken. Ahead lay unknown space and uncertain possibilities. She reached